During the second term of Donald Trump's presidency, America finds itself at a pivotal moment in history. A nation once united by ideals of freedom and progress is now fractured, struggling with deepening division and the surge of populism. The youth, inheritors of a broken system, stand at the precipice of an uncertain future. Torn between political extremes and the hollowness of consumer-driven culture, they face a daunting path ahead. Yet, amidst this turmoil, there lies an opportunity for transformation. This is not a tale of defeat, but of awakening, an invitation to young Americans to rise, not as victims of the age, but as architects of a new, more profound civilization. Part 1. A generation caught between two chaotic realities. America, 2025. Donald Trump has returned to the White House for a second term, and the nation is more fractured than ever. The ideological divide between political extremes has deepened into a societal wound. In the name of freedom, suspicion has been embraced by many. In the name of security, empathy has been sacrificed by many. In the name of identity, truth has been discarded by the masses. Amidst this turmoil stands a generation of young Americans, confused, angry, and searching. But what are they truly seeking? It's not just political change or improved economic conditions. On a deeper level, they long for meaning, a sense of belonging and authenticity in a world that feels increasingly empty. 1. The crisis of meaning in a world of distraction. Never before has a generation had such easy access to endless information, yet understood so little about the world or themselves. Today's youth are caught in a whirlwind of opposing ideologies, left versus right, woke versus nationalist, capitalist versus socialist. But what they truly lack is not opinions, it's direction. Direction not only in terms of what to believe, but how to live. When society no longer provides a collective moral compass, each person becomes an isolated island. But islands cannot build bridges. The result is a profound loneliness, not just psychological but existential. Modern youth doesn't merely feel alone, they feel unreal. They are disconnected not just from others but from their own inner voice. This is the paradox of hyperconnectivity. The more they scroll, the more they become lost. And so, they turn to identity in performative ways. Social media transforms into not just a space for connection, but a battleground for validation. In this environment, the self is no longer a mystery to be unraveled. It becomes a product to be sold. Image takes precedence over essence. 2. Populism as a reflection of cultural decline. The return of Trump is not merely a political event, it is a cultural symptom. Populism flourishes not in thriving societies, but in fractured ones. It lures with simple solutions to complex issues, offering enemies to blame rather than truths to confront. Populism promises power but delivers dependency on resentment, on slogans, on identity as a weapon. It creates a world of clear-cut divisions, us versus them, good versus evil, and in doing so strips away the complexities of life. For many young people who feel unseen, populism provides a tempting narrative. You are not lost, you are betrayed. You are not confused, you are under attack. What does this do to young people? It teaches them that strength comes from domination, not integrity. It replaces curiosity with certainty. It replaces introspection with outrage. It encourages blame instead of responsibility. In this environment, moral nuance disappears. Dialogue turns into combat. Every conversation becomes a potential battlefield. Instead of learning how to think, young people are taught whom to hate. This ideological climate stifles not only political progress, but personal growth. Young people are dragged into tribal conflicts, forced to choose sides, and in doing so, lose the space to explore who they are beyond ideology. Their hunger for identity is hijacked by political branding. 3. The collapse of the shared narrative. Every civilization is united by a common story, a narrative that defines where it originated, what it values, and where it is headed. America's story is unraveling. There is no longer a shared language for truth. Even facts have become partisan. Social media algorithms shape reality into isolated bubbles, strengthening echo chambers rather than fostering connection. In such a world, truth becomes subjective, and without truth, trust erodes. Without trust, society cannot endure. Reality becomes fragmented, not because people are lying, but because they are living in entirely separate realities. For young people, this creates an odd paradox. They are more connected than any generation before them, and yet more isolated. Their identity is shaped by likes and follows, by avatars and performances. But when the screen shuts off, many don't know who they are. The decay of shared narratives leads to cultural amnesia. Without a sense of continuity, of heritage, struggle, and sacrifice, young people drift in a sea of immediacy. What matters is no longer truth but virality, not wisdom but trendiness. Lust 4. Beyond victimhood, the call to become moral agents. In a fractured society, it's easy to view oneself as a victim of politics, of parents, of capitalism, of systems. Yet while victimhood is often justified, it can become a spiritual prison if held onto for too long. True growth begins not with blame, but with responsibility. Responsibility not as guilt, but as the ability to respond, the capacity to engage with life with integrity, depth, and purpose. This is the first call to live a philosophical life, to stop being a pawn of history and become the conscious author of your own story. Not by waiting for the world to change, but by transforming yourself first. Not through grand gestures, but through daily acts of attention, reflection, and discipline. In this light, self-help is not indulgence, it is rebellion. In a world that thrives on your distraction, to be calm is radical. In a world that profits off your outrage, to be kind is revolutionary. Toast of 5. From reaction to reflection, reclaiming the inner life. To live philosophically is not to escape society, but to refuse to be consumed by it. It means creating an inner sanctuary where your values are not dictated by trends, where your worth is not measured by performance, and where your beliefs are not shaped by algorithms. This inner life is not a luxury, it is essential for survival. In a world where everyone is shouting, the one who learns to listen, to silence, to conscience, to wisdom, becomes a revolutionary. It is time to return to the forgotten art of contemplation, to embrace stillness not as idleness, but as spiritual clarity, to rediscover solitude not as loneliness, but as the sacred space where the soul can breathe. In ancient times, when the world seemed to be crumbling, sages did not form armies. They built schools. Jesus walked among the poor and preached not power, but love. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth by teaching them to think. Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations during a time of war. Viktor Frankl found meaning in a concentration camp. These figures did not flee from crisis. They faced it with courage, and they emerged as beacons of light in the darkness. Today, young Americans can reclaim that legacy. They can become not the final generation of a declining empire, but the first generation of a moral renaissance. If they choose depth over speed, reflection over reaction, and integrity over influence. We find ourselves in an age of collapse, moral, epistemic, political. But collapse is not the end. It is the clearing of the ground. The youth of America face a choice: to let this era deform them, or to use it as the fire through which they shape themselves. This is not a call for optimism. It is a call for courage. Courage to think when others follow. Courage to feel when others hate. Courage to build when others destroy. The future does not belong to the angry. It belongs to the awakened. And the awakened are not born, they are made through fire, through doubt, through intentional choice. Let this generation be the one that chooses not to escape reality, but to transform it. Let them become not the victims of history, but its authors. Let them rise not in vengeance, but in vision. Let them be the light they seek. Part 2. The philosophy of life in an era of collapse, rejecting extremism, seeking depth. In the previous section, we outlined the turbulent societal context and the cognitive crises confronting American youth. In this section, we must ask a deeper question. In a chaotic society, what philosophy should young Americans live by? When collective values become unclear and politicized, self-development is no longer simply a career path, but a journey to find meaning in individual existence. This is not merely a choice, it is a necessity for spiritual survival. In an age of populism, humanistic values are distorted by oversimplified narratives. We are right, they are wrong. They are stealing your future. The truth is what you feel. This results in the spread of moral dualism, where you are either a hero or an enemy. The youth, when lacking a deep philosophical grounding, are easily drawn into this vortex because it offers them a sense of belonging, of being heard and understood. Yet, it is within this convenient consensus that inner freedom is sacrificed. We must remember the words of Søren Kierkegaard, the 19th century Danish existentialist philosopher. The greatest despair is not daring to become oneself. In today's American society, this despair manifests in two extremes, either losing direction and succumbing to indifference, or elevating oneself through ideological labels. Both paths lead to the loss of authentic selfhood. Therefore, what young Americans need is not more slogans, but a philosophy of life that can guide them through the darkness. 1. Awakening, not following trends. Awakening is not about chasing the latest self-help trend or relying on consumer-driven self-development methods. In philosophical terms, awakening is the ability to observe oneself from a moral and spiritual distance. It is stepping back from dominant discourses to ask, do I believe this because I've thoughtfully reflected on it, or because I've been momentarily swept up by it? Awakening also involves the courage to confront uncertainty. Today's world often pushes us to pick sides to feel secure, but a true philosophy of life requires the ability to live with ambiguity without losing one's inner compass. Young people must learn how to sit with the question longer, rather than hastily seeking easy answers. 2. Independent thinking as a moral act. In a time when both political sides tend to radicalize their messages, preserving space for free thought becomes a moral act. This doesn't mean taking a neutral stance, compromising, or avoiding politics. On the contrary, it requires the courage to embrace the truth, even when it comes from the other side, and to oppose wrongdoings, even when they arise from our side. In a post-truth world, the ability to distinguish between objective facts and subjective beliefs is a critical life skill. Young people must develop the ability to verify sources, cross-check arguments, and most importantly, regularly question their own perspectives. This does not diminish one's character, it strengthens it, as it is rooted in personal experience rather than societal imitation. 3. Training morality as a spiritual foundation. In an era where right and wrong are replaced by aligning with our side or not, maintaining personal morality becomes a revolutionary act of resistance. Here, morality is not confined to religious doctrines or traditional ethics, but refers to the ability to recognize the moral consequences of one's actions, both toward others and oneself. Young Americans must learn to refrain from wrongdoing, even when no one is watching, and to have the courage to do what is right, even if it leads to ridicule or isolation. This requires a mental resilience that goes beyond the need for social acceptance. Such strength can only be cultivated by building a firm philosophical foundation within, a value system that is not swayed by fleeting political trends. 4. Empathy, understanding others to understand oneself. The division within American society is largely the result of each side living in its own cognitive bubble, disconnected from the reality of others. To challenge populism, it's not enough to argue. One must have an open heart to empathize with the fears and struggles of others. Young people must step into different spaces, engage with those they disagree with, listen to people whose lives differ from their own, contribute to communities in need, take part in interfaith dialogues, and immerse themselves in storytelling through art. These experiences not only broaden understanding, but also dismantle collective egoism, a core force behind populism. 5. Being a person among the crowd, the journey of not avoiding. A common misconception is that withdrawing from society is the best way to remain pure. But as Camus wisely said, there is no freedom in isolation. Freedom only exists in commitment. Young Americans must learn how to engage with the world without being consumed by it, to participate without losing their sense of self. They can work in politics, media, education, the arts, wherever they choose. But they must carry with them a flame of awareness and moral courage. Every small action, every intentional way of living, contributes to the rebuilding of a fractured society. They must believe that their lives have value, not because of external achievements, but because of the inner integrity with which they live. In a society divided by populism and radicalization, the philosophy of life for young Americans cannot rely on old formulas. They need a new morality, one that combines freedom with responsibility, awakening without cynicism, and humanism without ambiguity. A philosophy of life is not a book to be memorized or a dogma to be followed. It is a daily practice, in every choice, every interaction, and every moment of self-reflection. Through this, they will not only survive this turbulent era, but also redefine the American character for generations to come. Part 3. Rebirth from the collapse. Youth as the creators of a new society. The distance between awareness and action is immense, yet it is in this gap that awakened individuals can emerge as powerful forces of creation. In this final section, we will explore how young Americans, armed with philosophical strength and driven by their own actions, can rise from the ruins. They will not only survive this turbulent era, but also forge a new civilization, one that is more humane, profound, and sustainable. 1. Rebuilding from the ground up, not reform, but spiritual restructuring. A society in collapse cannot be healed through superficial adjustments. It demands a profound restructuring, starting from the core, from consciousness and ethics to the very way individuals perceive themselves. The youth need not wait for someone else to reform the system. They must be the ones to initiate a new way of life, an awakened humanism. This model places human value not in status or symbols, but in the depth of character and the capacity to create a positive impact. Young Americans have the potential to build communities rooted in empathy, intergenerational learning, cooperative economies, and healing practices. Small, yet powerful social forms that offer profound hope for the future. Part 2. From consumption to creation, transforming instinct into mission. Consumer culture ensnares youth in a repetitive cycle of buying, using, discarding, growing bored, and searching for the next thing. In this pattern, they don't live, they are lived. True rebirth from collapse requires abandoning the victim mentality, breaking free from dependency on systems, and consciously choosing to become creators. Young people must learn to create themselves, to develop practical life skills, master personal finance, pursue a meaningful vocation, use time purposefully, and cultivate self-taught knowledge. From this foundation, they will gain the ability to produce goods, services, spaces, and ideas that benefit their communities. Each individual creator becomes a vital force, a healthy cell, helping to rebuild the fractured social fabric. 3. Leadership through character, not waiting for power. Leadership is no longer reserved for the elected. It is a way of being in the world. In a post-truth era, the new leader is not someone skilled in manipulating crowds, but someone who dares to live authentically, even in the face of rejection. A young person can lead by speaking the truth when others remain silent, standing firm in ethical conduct amidst confusion and compromise, choosing to live a principled life when others choose to surrender. These small actions, when multiplied, create a leadership that spreads organically, where power is no longer concentrated in a single individual, but is shared through the integrity of millions. Returning to the sacred, the spirituality of the awakened generation. Populism not only distorts politics, but also diminishes spiritual depth. It replaces genuine faith with idolization of leaders and compassion with justified hatred. Yet, human beings cannot thrive without a sense of the sacred. Without the divine, they will inevitably worship other idols. Young Americans must reconnect with their inner source of life through prayer, meditation, acts of kindness, studying religious philosophy, and taking time to reflect. This is not about adopting a new belief, but about cultivating spiritual capacities that will fortify them against the waves of collective confusion. A return to the sacred does not signify regression. On the contrary, it marks the maturity of a civilization, where science and the soul coexist harmoniously, and political actions are guided by the light of universal love. Title 5. Establishing a new social covenant. The youth are the first to sign. The old social contract, where the state protects rights and individuals pursue their personal interests, has crumbled in the face of a fragmented world. Now young people must sign a new covenant, not with ink on paper, but through their actions and way of living. I live not to compete, but to collaborate. I work not to enrich myself, but to serve others. I develop myself not to surpass others, but to become the truest version of myself. I do not wait for the government or organizations to change society. I change myself to change society. This is the commitment of a new generation, a moral constitution that doesn't require a flag or a leader, but can spread like light from one heart to another. Conclusion message: be the flame, not just the spark. America stands at the precipice of historical collapse. Yet, like every crisis in human history, this moment is an opportunity for renewal, not defeat. Young Americans were not born to merely be shaped by the era, but to reshape it. They do not need to wait for society's approval or political change. They can begin now with the simplest of actions: live authentically, think deeply, act responsibly, love selflessly. In an age of confusion, those who dare to live with clarity are the ones who lead. In a world of fear, those who dare to live with love are the ones who make history. Be the flame, it does not need to be grand, but it must burn brightly from within. A spark can light the path in darkness, but only a flame can dispel it.